What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Anyways, tonight we're going to be taking a look at a couple of scholars that are going to directly respond to me and my problems with the minimal facts argument. We're going to be looking at what they have to say about my contention with the minimal facts argument. I will try to explain to you guys what the minimal facts argument is in a nutshell that Gary Habermas is quite known for defending. So we're going to be taking a look at that tonight. If you heathens want to fuck around and find out how bad these scholars' response is to my minor objection to the minimal facts argument, then please stay tuned. We got Mike Licona and we've got Gary Habermas, two people who advance the minimal facts argument. Now, if you guys aren't aware of the shit that's been going on in the apologist community, there are actually two warring factions right now, okay? And I know, Christians warring against themselves. Who would have thought? So you've got Gary Habermas, Mike Licona, and other people that are very much in favor of the minimal facts argument. And then you've got other people over here that are part of this maximal case argument that seems to go the opposite direction of minimal facts. And the maximal case argument for the resurrection, they really don't like the minimal facts argument. Not the people, like I guess they're fine with the people, but they really don't like the minimal facts argument. They're vehemently against it. And so it's kind of been weird watching this play out. Mike Licona, Gary Habermas, they were all on a stream on Braxton Hunter's channel, Trinity Radio. And I did do a super chat just to make sure that I got, their attention. In case you guys don't know what the minimal facts argument is, the minimal facts has actually fluctuated from between 6 facts plus some extras all the way up to 12 facts. And Gary Habermas has revised his list throughout the years of what the minimal facts are. And typically the minimal facts don't really solidify that anything actually happened in history. They only accomplish solidifying that a belief about these things started to exist. They arose in certain people started believing in these things, and that's really all it proves. Now, an example of some of the minimal facts that are proposed in this argument are, of course, Jesus existed. Now, for the purposes of this particular discussion, I want to yell this for the people in the back. I don't mind accepting that Jesus existed as a historical person for the purposes of destroying the minimal facts argument. Just in case anybody was a little curious about that. So Jesus existed is one minimal fact. Doesn't prove he resurrected. Another fact is that he was crucified by Pontius Pilate and he died on the cross. That might be two different ones. That's another example of a minimal fact. Even if that did happen, that doesn't prove that he resurrected from the dead. He gathered a following of people, still doesn't prove that he resurrected from the dead. He was quoted as being seen alive after being buried. He was buried in the tomb is another thing that's usually stated. Like another thing that could be stated is the tomb was found empty or something like that. Like a lot of people apparently, according to Gary Habermas, which he's never actually published a list of people that agree with these facts, but he says that a lot of people agree that the tomb was found empty. And then another thing is disciples reportedly saw visions or saw Jesus after he was supposedly in the tomb, dead and everything like that. And then people were converted, like Paul. And the brother, one of the brothers of Jesus was apparently convinced. These are typically minimal facts, are considered minimal facts. Now, like I said, Gary Habermas has waffled on, some of these facts. He's went as low as 6 with some honorable mentions tacked on. And so it's really weird that he consistently says that this proves Jesus resurrected from the dead. So we're not even talking about any other historical idea in this other than Jesus resurrected from the dead. That's apparently what it's supposed to prove. Now, I have a problem with this. I posted my problem for Braxton to read to these guys. And so that's what we're going to be listening to today. I hope you're holding on to your butts, because it gets a little weird with Gary Habermas there for a little bit. If Gary Habermas happens to be watching tonight, I don't mean any of this in a mean way. How I'm going to respond. I'm trying to be as nice as possible in this response. I was in no way trying to demean your minimal facts case or anything like that. I was just trying to give people a full picture of what the minimal facts case is and how it's changed over time, just in case he decides to watch this. So anyways, let's get on into the video with Trinity Radio.
Okay, now this is interesting. Here is a atheist YouTuber who I've had friendly interactions with, named Godless Engineer. And this is what Godless Engineer says. I see the minimal facts argument as just getting to a belief arose, but doesn't connect it to actual history. Thoughts on this view?
Yeah, so before they get to the response here, what I see the minimal facts case doing is establishing that people started to believe in these things. You know, there's obvious facts that we're taking at face value here, like Jesus existed, maybe he was crucified, maybe he died, all this other stuff. Like, none of that actually relates to the idea that Jesus resurrected, other than, I guess, he has to live in order to die and resurrect, maybe. All of that could have happened, and still Jesus didn't resurrect. As far as the actual thing that it's supposed to prove, the only thing that it really does is it says that, well, these people started to believe in these things. But just because people start to believe something doesn't mean that that something happened historically, or that it actually happened in history. That's what I mean by this question. Maybe I wasn't as clear as I should have been. I feel like I got my point across, but let's see where they go with this.
Yeah, let me take a stab. When you say 100 and something arguments and considerations defend facts, those are historical considerations. To say this isn't even a historical argument sounds to me like I don't like the argument approach.
No. It's not that I don't like the argument's approach, Gary Habermas. What I'm saying is that this argument, while attempting to place these things in history, the only thing that it actually does is place that a belief arose in history, not that this actually happened. It's a bit of a nuanced thing that I'm complaining about here. I feel like he's not really understanding what I'm meaning by just a belief arose. Also, he's talking about 100 arguments defending these facts, or hundreds of arguments that are part of the minimal facts argument. There aren't 100 arguments. There are like between 6 and 12 pieces of evidence that they claim proves that Jesus resurrecting is the most likely explanation. Not hundreds, at most fucking 12.
You may not like what the people report, but they did report it. It's in the data, and it's in data from unbelievers. It does correspond to real history.
But it doesn't correspond to real history. I mean, we have reports of people experiencing or having these experiences or whatnot. I feel like a better explanation, a naturalistic explanation, would be that these people either had grief hallucinations, or they just had hallucinations in general because they were schizotypals. Any number of explanations that don't include a magical Jew resurrecting from the dead would circumvent the idea that a magical Jew resurrected from the dead. Let's just say that these people did see what they saw. The only thing that's reported in the data is that these people started to believe these things. That's the only thing that's reported. Paul only reports that he started believing in the resurrection of Jesus. Not that the resurrection of Jesus like actually happened in history or something like that. Not even the early church fathers cared about the historical nature of the Gospels. They just cared that it was a nice, wholesome message that they could get behind. That was it. You look at any of the early church fathers like Justin Martyr, Origen, Irenaeus, any of them. You look at any of their works. They didn't care about the historicity of the Gospels or the historicity of Christianity. They only cared about whether or not it made them feel good, whether it was a good message for them to believe in. That's the only thing that they cared about. So just saying that, oh, well, you can't just eliminate or ignore this data. I'm not ignoring the data. I'm just taking a skeptical and critical look at what the data literally says. And what the data literally says and what the data literally proves is that there were some Jewish Christians at that time that started believing in these things. And that's it.
And my second thought is, yeah, a belief arose. Yeah, we're okay. We say the disciples had experiences that they believe were appearances of the risen Jesus. That's true. But try to come up with a naturalistic theory and see what happens.
Oh, okay. So challenge number 1 from Gary, come up with a naturalistic explanation that can explain Jesus existing, his death, burial, resurrection, and then people claiming that they saw him, and then people that were unbelievers or people that just didn't believe at first, they became convinced. Like, typically those are the most common ones that are pointed out. So what naturalistic explanation can I come up with my non-historian, my amateur brain here, to explain all these things? Well, obviously, the easiest explanation is, well, Jesus existed. He gathered some people around him. He was eventually crucified by the Romans, died, and was buried in a tomb. That covers that. That's a naturalistic explanation. That's perfectly fine. Again, I'm a mythicist, so I don't think that he actually existed, but for the purposes of this argument, I'm just saying that let's accept that as being history right there, and then let's get past that point, okay? So how do we explain people saying that they experienced risen Jesus? Well, hallucinations are a thing. Dreams are a thing. Group hallucinations are a thing. There's so many different naturalistic explanations to explain why grieving people would see a loved one after they've supposedly perished in such a violent way. So there's plenty of reasons why people would say that. People now, after grieving and losing somebody close to them, sometimes they will hallucinate that, their dead loved one or something like that. People have hallucinations all the time. This is a commonly observed phenomena that has happened. We've been able to study it. So that explains that. Now, why were people like Paul and James convinced? Oh, well, I don't know. Gullible people believe in gullible fucking things. What reasons did Paul have to believe in it? Well, apparently Jesus appeared to him in a vision, and that convinced him. And then the James thing is like, it comes from the Gospels, Gospel of John, I believe it was, no, that was Thomas, doubting Thomas that fingered his hole. There's usually Paul and one other person that's mentioned as being an unbeliever. I think it's normally his brother James, supposed brother James, that they typically talk about. But gullible people easily believe falsities is a thing that happens. That's a naturalistic explanation. What is left for me to explain? The environment surrounding this point in time with how people were understanding the Jewish prophecies and the prophecies about the Messiah. There were people that were expecting a resurrected Messiah, a Messiah that would be shamed on the cross, not specifically a cross, but just shamed in general, killed, and then resurrected in order to absolve sins. That was a thing that some Jews were expecting in the first century. So it's no wonder that some Jews came to believe that happened. There's nothing here that requires magical Jew resurrection as a way to explain anything. So challenge accepted and completed there, Gary. I doubt any of that is really going to convince Dr. Gary Habermas here. The fact that I, as an amateur, can logically think my way around a natural explanation for all of these data points means that there's a serious problem with the minimal facts argument.
In fact, I just told Mike today, most of the major naturalistic theories, the biggies, are being abandoned by the major scholars. What I mean by that is they'll say little things, but almost very few of them will choose just one and run with it. And as one said to me in a debate, no, I'm not going to pick one. Why not? Because you're going to get me in a corner and I'm not going to be very comfortable.
So I sincerely doubt that this actually happened. I haven't gone through every single debate that Gary Habermas has done. All the debates that I've seen of him, I've never seen somebody be like, no, I'm not just going to pick one because that's going to put me in an uncomfortable position. It may have happened regardless of whether or not it did happen, though. The reason why somebody wouldn't want to pick a single naturalistic explanation as the hard line, like, boom, this is what happened, is that we simply cannot know. For all of those data points, there are multiple naturalistic explanations that can perfectly explain every single data point with no problems with, parsimony or other facts that are later discovered. Like there just simply are too many naturalistic explanations that could explain the data for anybody to really lay their hat on one single one. It's not that you're painting them in an uncomfortable position. It's just that there's too much that could be true for anybody to say for sure.
So if they think that's a lot of naturalistic theories, then I guess beliefs arising are the best. They're the best response because they're not disproven. So
beliefs arising are the best response because they're not disproven. What? They're not disproven? I'm sorry. It's not up to me to disprove someone's claim. There are situations where I can, like the claim of Christianity. I do feel like I'm well equipped to disprove that claim. But just some fuck saying, oh, I had a vision of Jesus. How am I supposed to disprove that? No, you didn't, motherfucker. Show me the videotape. Ah, you can't. Therefore, it didn't happen. Because that's not how visions are described generally. It's not up to me to disprove somebody's crazy ass vision. All right. It's not up to anybody to disprove the claims of Paul. Paul said that he saw a vision of Jesus. What are the most likely reasons for that? Well, he could have magically seen a Jew resurrect. That's true. That's a possibility. Just because it's a possibility doesn't mean that it's probable. What's the most likely thing that happened? Oh, he had a hallucination. He had some kind of like vision. He sniffed the wrong kind of mushroom one day, and he had a wild vision of Jesus. Or maybe he was under such serious anxiety, depression, or stress that he ended up hallucinating Jesus as a way for his mind to get him to come to terms with his persecution of Christians. Like, there are so many different things that I could come up with here to explain it. And that's not me disproving Paul. That's me explaining the data. How does this work with a naturalistic worldview where magical resurrecting Jews just simply don't happen as far as we can tell? So, I mean, that's what that is.
I'd only add, I think that there can be different types of minimal facts approaches. Minimal facts, we can get to those. Now, what do you do with those minimal facts? Gary may.
And that's worldview. That's worldview. People will reject whatever they want, and Christians have to think, hey, you're on your own. You account for what your beliefs are. If that's the question is, these are beliefs arose. This is your belief that's rose.
No. It's not my belief that has arose. I don't even know what Gary's trying. He's about to go off on a tangent, but this isn't this is me just logically thinking my way through their argument and trying to figure out what does this actually prove as far as history is concerned. And the only thing that it gets us to is that people started believing in this thing. It doesn't actually get us to these things actually happened in history, right? It doesn't get us there. So this isn't like my belief. It's not like I have a belief in the rules of logic, or I have a belief in analytical thinking or anything like that. It's not like I have a belief in these things. This is just what the argument entails when you honestly look at the facts that you presented. So it's not that I have a belief that has arisen or anything like that. I like how he didn't let Mike Licona finish though. he just felt he's like, how dare you question my minimal facts?
How come you never have any beliefs? Only we have beliefs, right?
For one thing, I never said that I don't have beliefs. Now, as far as my atheism goes, no, I don't have beliefs. Like, I don't assert any positive beliefs about whether or not God exists, other than the fact that I just don't believe in a God. As far as atheism goes, now, if you want to be specific, agnostic atheist is what I identify as, and that's where I don't know if a God exists, but I choose, or not choose, but I just simply don't believe in a God. And so that's where I'm at with that whole thing. I do have other beliefs that make me up as a person outside of the religious discussion, outside of the whether or not God exists conversation. I do have other beliefs, about me. Those other beliefs have no bearing here on this conversation. This is an out of context thing that we're talking about here. I do have beliefs, but these beliefs aren't pertinent to what we're discussing here.
Beliefs are on the other. And by the way, for a godless engineer, I say this teasingly, we've got good atheist friends too. Try to produce an argument for atheism, which, if it's true, would require atheism to be true. When you say that in a debate, many debaters that Mike and I know, they won't take you up on it. I'm not arguing if it's true. I'm just saying I don't believe what you believe.
I can't answer his actual challenge because obviously I don't assert that atheism is true, because ultimately I'm agnostic about whether or not like the supernatural exists, whether God exists in general. But if we were to change the context of this a little bit, and I'm not trying to straw man Gary Habermas here or anybody, I'm just saying that I can't answer his original challenge the way that he phrased it. But if we take it as to how Christians mean it, it's make an argument that shows that atheism is more likely to be true than Christianity, right? Like just Christianity itself. Like what proves Christianity is false? And I feel like I could answer that challenge, because in that respect, I am a Gnostic atheist, because I know that Yahweh or the God of the Bible doesn't exist, and I can make positive claims about the fact that God doesn't exist. The fact that Genesis, really doesn't match anything that we really find in history as far as the main storyline, especially Genesis 1 and 2, creation of the universe, the flood narrative, that's not true. Given that the Bible is kind of the requirements document almost, or at least the requirement descriptions, whatever, however you want to put that in engineering terms, the fact that the Bible does not describe reality that we live in, and that there's several things that the Bible is wrong about in reality, proves that version of the God doesn't exist. The Abrahamic version of God cannot exist the way that it's described in the Bible. And I mean, I've got a whole channel here that's built off of my arguments against the Abrahamic God. So if you really want to know what arguments I have, other than there are things that are contradictory in the Bible there are things in the Bible that are contradictory to reality. If you want something more than that, you'll have to check out the rest of the videos on my channel. But I can answer that challenge multiple times, and I'm answering it here. I can prove that atheism, it's more likely that Yahweh doesn't exist than Yahweh does exist because of those facts, right? So I've answered that particular challenge. Again, just to stress so that people don't try to take me out of context here, I'm answering a different question or challenge than he initially offered, because I'm not that kind of atheist that makes a positive claim about a general deity, right? I'm only specifically talking about the Abrahamic God, the God of the Bible. Well, God of the Bible, God of the Hebrew Bible, the Torah, Septuagint, and then of course the Quran. So it's a lot of religions that have the Abrahamic God. But
now I want to know your view is true. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm only going to say I don't like your view. Well, fess up, come up with your own argument. If you don't like this one, give one on the other side.
I mean, I have, like I said, I've built a channel off of giving alternative explanations for these facts, for the idea that Yahweh or the Abrahamic God exists. I've built my entire channel off of it, and it's really not a 30-minute video where I just say, I don't agree with you about that. I don't like your view about this. I have scientific studies. I've got philosophical studies. I've got studies coming out of my ass about how wrong the Bible and the Abrahamic God is as far as describing reality goes. And so it's literally, I don't know a single atheist content creator on YouTube that just sits there and is like, I don't like your view, none. I just don't like it. So fuck off. I don't like you. I don't like your view. Fucking get out of here and off of YouTube. Like, I don't know anybody that does that.
How I'd respond to Godless Engineer, I'm saying the minimal facts approach, it depends what you do with the facts afterward.
Yep.
And what I do with the facts is I take a historical approach. So I say, let's compose or formulate various hypotheses that attempt to account for these minimal facts or historical bedrock, and then let's weigh those various hypotheses to see which one explains the facts the best.
Oh, I totally agree here, Mike, in case he's watching. I totally agree with you about this. What do we do with these facts? How do we analyze these facts? What do these facts tell us? But the problem is that you get a lot of apologists and scholars out there. They think that magical explanations for things, divine explanation for things, are better explanations than naturalistic things. Here's why I find that to be incredibly irrational. And that's because we have not actually proven that divine things have happened. Obviously, they think, Mike Licona, I'm fairly certain, as well as like Lee Strobel, Frank Turek, all of the general scholars and apologists out there, they believe in miracles. They believe that miracles have happened, that there are provably miracles that have happened. But the problem is that when you actually scientifically test these miracles, they all fail. They do not stand up to scrutiny. And I mean, if you could actually prove a miracle, you could win that James Randi $1 million prize. I don't know if it's still up for grabs, but I would think so. But in any case, if anybody could prove anything miraculous, prove that miracles actually happened, they could win $1 million. But Problem is that when you actually stand them up to scientific scrutiny, they are not miracles. They do not pass muster when it comes to science. So you can't say that these are proven things. You just go with, well, I believe them to be true, or I believe these things have been proven. They haven't, but that is the reason why magical, miraculous claims will never supersede an explanatory power over naturalistic claims. Naturalistic claims use nature and what we understand about nature to explain phenomena that happens in reality. And we have not seen that a God is necessary for natural phenomena to happen. There has not been a study published that connects natural phenomena to God. In fact, in our past, every time we've explained something with God did it, we've been able to, in the future, explain it with science and a scientific understanding of our reality. We've been able to explain it through naturalistic means. And so, given that prior probability, it seems far more likely that magical Jew resurrection is never going to supersede the explanatory power of naturalistic explanations for anything. And so that's how I interpret these minimal facts. That's how I come to the conclusion that they just talk about a belief arising. There's a huge leap that's being made by apologists and scholars here, like Dr. Habermas and Dr. Licona, where they leap over the belief arising and they go directly to, well, that proves that Jesus resurrected. But the problem is that you got to build a bridge to get there, a bridge that's made of facts, like empirical evidence that definitely links the two ideas. And apologists just haven't done that yet. Fuck you, Mouse.
So I use certain criteria like explanatory scope, explanatory power, less ad hoc, and plausibility. So I'm using arguments of inference to the best explanation.
I've heard him make these arguments before, Mike Licona. What it seems to me is that Mike says that he utilizes these things, but yet his subjective interpretation of the facts, of the information, he always leads them in the direction of believing in Jesus and God. So like when he says plausibility, well, one of Mike Licona's arguments for the historical resurrection of Jesus is that first you have to believe that the Abrahamic God exists, like Yahweh exists first, and that makes it plausible that Jesus would have resurrected. And so you have to build your entire case off of an ad hoc statement that isn't proven by anything. It's like one of them floaty fucking clouds in the Mario levels where you step on it and it's like, oh shit, oh, I better jump off, but there's nowhere to jump. Actually, I think that might be like Price is Right or something. I'm not sure. Anyways, my point is that it's an ad hoc statement that's not substantiated by facts. We have not thoroughly established that Yahweh exists. In fact, the evidence points in the exact opposite direction that God exists, or well, Yahweh exists specifically. And so you can't start from, oh, Yahweh exists, therefore it's more likely that Jesus would have been resurrected by God, i.e. Jesus himself. Then there are plenty of other arguments that they use, like the women finding the tomb empty. That's got a lot of problems with it. And so they do provide more arguments surrounding that's outside of the minimal facts argument. When he says that he uses explanatory power, plausibility, inference to the best explanation, and all this other stuff, it comes with a lot of subjective interpretation of the information. So where I would see magical Jew resurrection not having any explanatory power, considering the prior probabilities, he would see it as the best explanation because he already accepts that Yahweh exists and that the Bible is representative of reality, and that Jesus existing and being crucified means that he was resurrected, because if Jesus was the Son of God and God exists, then that means that God would want to resurrect him, which is basically just the storyline of the Gospels. You're just regurgitating that. So when he says that he's going with the best explanatory power, or the explanation that has the most explanatory power, he's skewing the interpretation of the data in order for it to go in the direction that he wants it to. At least that's what I've perceived in his many debates that he's had and the many speeches that he's given on this particular topic.
And what a historian is going to do is say, well, the argument that best account the hypothesis that best accounts for the minimal facts, the historical bedrock, should be regarded as what probably occurred.
And what we have is just a mere disagreement about what these minimal facts entail. I feel that the minimal facts only entail that a belief arose, while Gary Habermas and Mike Licona, they make the giant leap to Jesus actually resurrected as a matter of history, which is not something most critical historians would agree to. Only New Testament scholars, which most New Testament scholars, they would agree that, Jesus resurrected from the dead as a matter of history. That's what most New Testament scholars would agree to. So, in fact, the majority of people with relevant degrees in this area do agree with these two here. I'm on the fringe in this situation. Everybody that doesn't believe in the resurrection of Jesus as a matter of history, or as a historical fact, we are in the fringe of scholarship, okay? And this isn't just me saying it. Bart Ehrman feels the same way, as well as plenty of other critical scholars out there. We don't believe in the resurrection, and that puts us on the fringes of this particular field of history.
And so when you go through that exercise, the resurrection hypothesis does come out on top every time. And so that's how I connect the minimal facts, the historical bedrock, to actual history. I use historical method.
But he doesn't use historical. Well, he attempts to use a historical method. I mean, you can use a hammer to open up a car door by smashing out the window. Does that mean that that is how you're supposed to open up a car door? Honey, is that how you're supposed to open up a car door when you don't have time for a handle? I'm just saying that, you can misuse a tool. The historical method is a tool. And if you misuse it and get to a bad conclusion, you're still at a bad conclusion. You're just confidently incorrect about that conclusion.
By the way, Braxton, people don't know Mike's big book, which is the best one out there on historical argument for sure. He doesn't just say this. All the other views come out short. He measures up, 6 or 7? You have one in the appendix, too. 6 and plus an appendix where you think the guy's pretty good. He's got at least a half dozen. And he puts the facts up there and checks the boxes on where the guys come out. So he has done a put up or shut up kind of argument where here's the data. How does your view explain it? And he goes with a lot of actual critical views and rejects them for not explaining the data. The data are historical.
The data are historical.
The data are historical.
The data are historical. As the data has stated, even if I accept them as being historically accurate, these points of information, which I don't agree that they're historically proven to be true. Not all of them, at least. I don't agree with all of them being historically true. But even if they are all historically true, that still doesn't get us back to a historical resurrection. All it gets us to is that people believed a resurrection happened. And that is not placing it in history. That's placing the fact that this group started to believe in these things, not that they actually happened. I get that he's done some kind of comparative analysis, his own subjective comparative analysis on alternate explanations. And while I think that there are explanations that are less likely than others, they are still all vastly more likely than a magical Jew resurrecting from the dead. Now, obviously, Mike, being a scholar, being somebody that has suffered at the hands of the mainstream New Testament scholars, who he's lost jobs because of his position on certain things. He's lost speaking engagements because of certain things. He's obviously only going to consider the proposition that Jesus historically resurrected from the dead as the only viable option. I feel, and no offense, Mike, if you happen to watch it all the way to the end here, I feel like you're a bit compromised in your ability to assess this information due to a dogmatic view of Christianity. I feel like Mike Licona, Gary Habermas, as well as nearly all New Testament scholars are dogmatically compromised on the topic of history when it comes to their own religion. Because if they step out of line even a little bit, which if you guys don't know, Mike Licona lost jobs and speaking engagements all because he said that the zombie resurrection that happened when Jesus died on the cross that only occurred in one gospel, I believe that was Matthew. He said that that was apocalyptic imagery and not that it really happened in history. He lost jobs and speaking engagements because of that. Recently, another scholar also lost their job at a Catholic university for having quote unquote heretical views, as far as I can tell, which I'll be doing a video about that here soon. This is a pervasive problem in New Testament studies, that you have to be very strategic about what you say. So when Mike Licona or Gary Habermas analyze naturalistic explanations of the data, you can't know if you're getting an honest analysis or if it's being dogmatically driven. And that's the problem that I have with it. I just simply can't trust New Testament scholars, especially not like Mike Licona or Gary Habermas, on these historical questions. Now, if I have a question about whether or not, Jesus loved to rub one out listening to Metallica, then I would consult New Testament scholars. I feel like on these critical questions about the historicity of the resurrection and even the historicity of Jesus himself, I just simply can't trust them. And that's where I stand. I really appreciate Gary Habermas and Mike Licona for taking the time to actually answer my question instead of just blowing me off and not answering the question. I know I may have been a little harsh in this review at times of their answer, but if you could say anything, you could at least say that I'm being honest about how I feel about their answer, or I'm honest about their particular argument for the resurrection of Jesus. So if anything, you know that I'm being honest in this review of it. But I really feel like I'm being very analytical about these minimal facts. I'm being logical about where they lead, and I'm only coming to a conclusion that's built upon empirical evidence that we actually have, like text sources that we have in Paul. And I'm taking some things for granted, like the existence and the death and burial of Jesus. I'm just taking that at face value, that those things happen. And I'm getting to the nitty gritty part of whether or not these facts prove that Jesus resurrected from the dead. And I just find that it only actually supports a belief arising, which, according to Gary Habermas, is good enough. The idea that people just started to believe in it is good enough for him to say that this shit actually happened. I doubt that he would accept that for any other fantastical claim that's not part of Christianity. Nobody should accept similar claims like that. Just because people started to believe shit, that means it's real? Well, fuck, honey, those oh shit, I fucked my camera. Shit, honey, those Heaven's Gate motherfuckers, they caught a ride on that ship on the back of the Halley's Comet. Those crazy sons of bitches. The suicide of the Heaven's Gate cult was not a fun day, I'm sure. Oh, a ride on a comet would be awesome. Using Gary Habermas's idea here that just because these people believed that it happened, that means that it did. I guess that means the Heaven's Gate cult is riding around in a spaceship right now, or any of the other cults, any of the other crazy ideas. Fuck, you know what, honey? Shit, every time. There are so many millions of Americans right now that feel that Donald Trump is innocent and he is still in power despite being investigated by the FBI, the DOJ, all of his cronies getting their cell phones taken at Hardee's and shit. Despite all of that, Donald Trump is in office right now and Jim Carrey is playing Joe Biden. He's one of the actors, apparently. So yeah, apparently that's a true fact now, given Gary Habermas's methodology for getting to a historical resurrection. That's what I thought about Gary Habermas and Mike Licona's response to me. Really appreciate everybody watching tonight. And, if you will, please leave a comment down below with what you thought about tonight's video. Do you think that they had a point? Do you think I'm wrong? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd really love to hear what y'all think or read what y'all think. But if you're going to be leaving out right now, I hope that you guys have an awesome weekend, and I will see you heathens later. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.